Hey, I'm Jesse. Let's have a devotion. Now we're going to look at Revelation 6, verses 5 and 6. All right, so we've seen the rider on the white horse, the rider on the fiery red horse, and now comes the namesake for the Redemption Church's beloved and now newly remodeled in the interior equipment trailer, because it's painted black. And so that's why we refer to it as the third horse of the apocalypse. When he opened the third seal, I heard the third living creature say, "Come." That's parallel structure to the previous two. And I looked, and there was a black horse. Its rider held a set of scales in his hand. Then I heard something like a voice among the four living creatures say, "A quart of wheat for a denarius, and 3 quarts of barley for a denarius, but do not harm the oil and the wine." All right, so this is the third of the 7 seals. Okay, do you remember the scroll introduced in Revelation 5? John wept and wept. No one could open it. Then Jesus is the qualified kinsman redeemer who's able to take it and break the seals. He opens the first seal that unleashes the rider on the white horse, interpreted by some to be the Antichrist. If you are a pre-tribulationist, that means that you believe in a literal rapture and that it's already happened as of the very first seal that's broken. Unless you make the case that, well, the Antichrist kind of sticks around a little bit longer and things get worse, and then he rises to prominence, and then the abomination of desolation, and then that's where you might overlap with a mid-tribulationist. So the third seal has been broken. The third living creature, do you remember these angels? Same thing, same as we saw in Ezekiel, these cherubim. If you've interpreted cherubim to be like flying white, fat, naked babies with harps, the book of Ezekiel is going to shock you. And in the book of Daniel is going to shock you. We see these creatures with these different faces, and it's possible that they're the same faces. It's just that each of them is facing a different direction when they're observed in Revelation, such that they each have the face of a lion, the face of a man, the face of a beast of burden, the face of an eagle. And now they're all facing different directions. So that looks like one has the face of a man, one has the face of a lion, one has the face of an eagle, one has the face of a beast of burden. That's these living creatures. And each of them has invited the horsemen to arrive. And we see God allowing and equipping, even like, and unleashing these horsemen. They work in such a way that the destruction is timed by God. Now, the power at work behind it, particularly if you believe that the first horseman is the Antichrist, the power at work behind that is Satan. And it's even accompanied by miraculous signs and wonders. And even those who would profess Christ might be deceived by these incredibly convincing miracles. The Bible uses the word miracles. But to be warned, if your faith is based strictly on the observation of miracles, you are primed to be deceived by the beast. And I looked, and there was a black horse, and its rider held a set of scales in his hand. This is interesting because there's even like a pagan goddess that you can kind of see the impact of her in the book of Acts, because there are people who are like named after her. And as Americans, we're even kind of familiar with this imagery. We typically see like this woman who is blindfolded holding a set of scales. Right? So you've got like the central balance point and then these 2 trays. And the idea is like justice is blind. And then justice is personified in this like anthropomorphic woman who represents justice herself. And be warned, that's actually the name of a false pagan goddess. So I've heard of Christians who claim to have like a spirit of justice. Watch out. That's like saying you're possessed by an ancient demon. Right? That means that you are the prophetess of a pagan faith. Right? Don't say that. In actuality, when we see this biblically, it's the third horseman of the apocalypse. Right? So either way, like as a Christian, you don't want to claim to have like the spirit of justice. I don't know who started that spirit of justice teaching, but you need to read the Bible, right? Because this is scary stuff. This is scary stuff. Don't try to take a biblical image or even a pagan image without realizing it's pagan. That's even worse. And try to condescend to other Christians and pretend like you have insight that they don't. Okay, don't be a Gnostic. Okay, claiming to have special knowledge from God. Don't be manipulative. Right? Just be honest instead. Look, the set of scales in his hand. It's bad news. We've got famine. We've got inflation. We've got scarcity. We've got starvation. For some context, a quart of wheat is about what it takes for an adult human to subsist on for one day. And a denarius was about what someone would earn in a day's wages. So in our culture, we have this idea of living paycheck to paycheck. Maybe you get paid twice a month or once a month or whatever it might be, or every week. Well, this is contextually like getting paid every day. And so you're not just living paycheck to paycheck, you're also living day to day. You get enough in one day to feed yourself for that one day. Yeah, but what if you have a family? Well, look at the next part of the proclamation of this voice from among the four living creatures. 3 quarts of barley for a denarius. So we got a quart of wheat. That's about enough to sustain one person for one day. Okay, what about 3 quarts of barley? Well, that barley is less nutritious than wheat and it's cheaper. So this is less than ideal, but let's say that you have a family, maybe like a husband, a wife, and one child, you'd barely be able to get by on this. And it's the same amount, right? So, the ratio of the cost ratio of like wheat to barley is like 1 to 3. And they both cost a denarius. So you can either feed one person some semi-nutritious wheat for one day, or you can feed a family of 3 a slightly less nutritious meal for the same thing, a day's wages. Whether you're single or you have a small family, everybody's living day to day. You get enough money to pay for what you or your family need just for that day. But do not harm the oil and the wine. There's some who point to this and they're like, yeah, but wine's not affected by famine because you harvested those grapes a long time ago and you had them in barrels, right? So they're not harmed by it. But actually, wine served a lot of other purposes too, in terms of like its alcohol content would have a sanitizing effect. And oil is used in the making of bread. So this is bad news for oil and wine as well, because if you are stricken with a famine, you're going to run out of wine too. So even if your stockpile is the same as it was yesterday, just by default, because of the nature of the famine, you don't have any more grapes coming in. So either way, even though it looked like you had a ton of wine stored up in like obsolescence almost, suddenly it all just became scarce because there's not more coming in. And it speaks to economic disruption and mass inflation. And so the text doesn't overtly indicate that this is because of famine. Because it's the third horse of the apocalypse, it's really more likely that, it's wrought upon the earth by the symptoms of the Antichrist's, false promises and the fiery red horse and the massive war, like the large sword that's given to him. And then, so to me, it follows more logically that this is the result of massive global scale war. It leads to inflation. Inflation is part of the judgment of God on the earth. It's the third seal. It's the third horseman of the apocalypse. Inflation is an incredibly bad thing. It could be indicative of the judgment of God, because it's never the fault of the laborer. Even if you take the view that this is brought upon them by famine, let's say that you take an anachronistic view of Revelation, and you place this more squarely in one of the upcoming seals where you've got, famine and upcoming, like the seals and the trumpets thereafter, you see like, what is it? Like 25%, of the earth's greenery, or like a third of the earth's greenery is wiped out. And the wind stops. My little girl, Autumn Grace, even asked me like, what would happen if there were no moon? And I just kind of began kind of on the spot speculating. I was like, well, if there weren't a moon, we wouldn't have tides. Without wind, inland areas probably wouldn't get the rain clouds they need. They'd still get a little bit of dew in the morning, but that could be bad for crops. It could like annihilate corn and bring on the real life manifestation of Christopher Nolan's Interstellar. But whether you look at it as caused by war or famine, either way, it's not the laborer's fault. You're still working as hard as ever. You might even be working harder. And then your currency just doesn't sustain you like it did. So these would be seen as like shocking prices. What was the book? Alas, Babylon? Something similar happens. This guy like owns a store and he piles up, money, And he quickly realizes that it's worthless now, because food is scarce, food's more valuable. And like it's a terrible time. And it's the exacerbation of the curse that was pronounced all the way back in the first book of the Bible. Can we talk about Genesis while we're teaching Revelation? And in the very first book of the Bible, we see the foundation laid for this very affliction brought on by the third horse of the apocalypse. Because in Eden, everything was perfect. Adam's job was that of a zoologist, just naming things. And now he has to labor for his food. And he has to earn it by the sweat of his brow and the dust of the earth. And the earth is producing these thorns and thistles, making it difficult for him. I don't care if you've never done agricultural labor in your life. You could work in IT, and I guarantee you know all about the thorns and the thistles. The jank, as we call it, like just the stuff you got to deal with to earn a living, to feed your kids. You just got to work hard to make that happen. And there's difficulty that arises. It's part of Adam's curse. Well, this is that curse exacerbated a millionfold and on a massive global scale. It's terrible, terrible times. And the people who are laboring like this, they didn't cause the circumstances that led to it. They just happened to be on the earth at this time. And your only hope is for those afflicted that they know Christ. So that is the third horse of the apocalypse. There's one more to go, right? We've seen the white horse, the fiery red one. This is the black one. And then, bad news, the fourth one could be the worst one of all.